resources to you. And if you are interested in learning more about our work at Opeeka, please reach out to us.
There we go. Okay. Here's what I want everybody to do. Whenever we deliver a workshop, Elizabeth and I together, we want to accomplish 3 objectives for all of our attendees. Number 1, we want you to learn something. Clearly, that's why you've taken the time. That's why you've signed up for the workshop. So we want to accomplish that first objective. Secondly, is we want to make sure that you walk away with at least 1 actionable item. So by the end of the day today or tomorrow, you can say, glad I attended that workshop. And lastly, as Ken mentioned, we want this to be an open dialogue, not just a presentation where we're talking at you. So we're going to engage you. We're going to ask you to do a survey for us at the beginning or the end. And we're also going to ask you to answer some questions along the way. And we want to have some fun. So if we answer some questions along the way, we can give away some cash and prizes as well. So without any further ado, let's talk about the entire focus of our practice, which is helping you with someone who's a loved one in your family with special needs, making their future more secure. Our organization is called Special Needs Funding Coach. And the reason we call ourselves Special Needs Funding Coach is because if you think of any activity that you have ever participated in where you had a coach, the coach had several very important roles. First and foremost is to teach you the fundamentals of whatever task, hobby, or game you were achieving, you were participating in. When it comes to planning financially for a loved one with special needs, families typically don't know how, and it's not their fault because no one's taught them. So our role is to teach families the basics. We recognize that you as a caregiver, you as a parent, you as a loved one for someone with special needs, you're always doing 2 things. You're always battling for something and you're always seeking something. What we want to do in our role is we want to bring these resources to you. So the 3 major priorities that we achieve, number 1, to make sure your loved one with special needs always qualifies for government support services. Number 2, to help answer that question, what happens when I'm gone? And number 3, regardless of your economics, resources, and status, we want to help you maximize whatever resources you have to achieve those objectives. So it all starts with the same question, which is clearly what's important to you. More importantly, what is important to you as a caregiver of a loved one with special needs? We know that the things you do every day, and we always say that they're unconsciously competent, meaning that you do them without thinking, are the things that you do for your loved one. But we also know that there's always something in the back of your mind, and most often it's probably in an evening when you can't sleep, when you're thinking, what happens when I'm gone? Who steps into that role? Who's going to look out for my loved one's best interest? Who's going to make sure they're safe and secure? And who's going to make sure they're having the quality of life that we envision them to have? So we're going to go through what we call 10 steps. After each step or anywhere along the line, if you would like to ask a question, please type it in the chat. Please unmute yourself, raise your hand, whatever you're most comfortable with. So what we're going to talk about is 10 steps that make that future more secure. And it's you taking an active role, but it's also you using the resources that are available to you. And that's where we've come to join with Opeeka today. So if we're talking about having a plan for the future, clearly I'm being Captain Obvious. But when we're talking about making that plan, what we're talking about is making sure that the things that you're going to need for your loved one, the bullet point says medical treatments, but we all know it's not only medical treatments, it's behavioral supports, it's lifestyle supports, all of those things that you're going to want your loved one with special needs to have. Now, we all know that the longer you plan in advance for these things, the better your outcomes can be, and the more impact you can have on those results without having to go and take drastic measures. Step 2 is education. We have lots of people from lots of different places on our workshop today. Some of you may have children that are young. Some of you may have adults. Some of you may have teens that are in transition years. So when we're talking about education, we recognize that from an individual, when they first begin to go to school up until the age of 21, through the Free and Appropriate Public Education Act, the Department of Education is required to provide the resources that are necessary for your loved one to be able to receive that education, whatever those supports are. However, when that person ages out of the school system, what's going to be next? Is it going to be a college that has a special needs supported system? Is it going to be a vocational program? Is it going to be a day program? Again, all of those things, the more they're planned and prepared for, the better those results can be. And lastly, we're going to talk about housing. Where's your loved one going to actually live? Are they going to live independently? Are they going to live semi-independently? Are they going to live with relatives? Are they going to live with you? And then if they are, what happens when you're no longer around? And we think one of the coolest things that's happening in adult housing for those with special needs is some of the hybrid things that are happening across the country. And we can talk about some of those as we go. So when we're talking about planning for the future, there are a lot of details, but if you look at those three main things, it's a great foundational piece to start. So here's where we want to get everybody involved. And we know that some people are going to have different experiences than others. So we're going to take it at the very basic foundational level. So your first question for you to answer, if you know the answer, type it in the chat. First person that gets the correct answer is going to get a chance to win some cash and prizes. So here's the question. What is the maximum amount of assets that an individual can have in their name, yet still qualify for Medicaid?
That was fast.
That was fast. That means we have educated people. That's good.
Yep, and they all are getting it right.
Everybody's getting it right. All right, we got a good
First
group.
one was Becky.
Becky, are you able to unmute yourself?
Don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that's because we have it set up for a larger conversation.
Okay. Becky,
Let's see.
here's what we're going to do. We want to give you,
Type in the chat. What she
yeah,
does.
we want to give you a chance to win some cash and prizes. So you can get a quick money scratch off, or if you want to go for the big money Mega Millions, this one's a bigger prize. This one's got a chance to win less money, but higher chance to win. Which would you prefer, Becky?
While she's typing her answer, you do have a comment from someone that says, last week I read that the 2000 was changed. I don't think we have any.
We don't have any
awareness
information
that.
on that. It may change from state to state. And certainly states like California have a little bit different laws than most states. But as far as we're understanding, on the federal level, that $2,000 asset is the limit.
Somebody just said that California, they changed Medi-Cal property limits to 100,000.
I can't answer that. I don't know the answer for sure. Here's what I can tell you. In many states, there are more than one way to qualify for Medicaid. We're currently based in New Jersey. So we know in New Jersey, for example, there are 5 different ways that you can qualify for Medicaid. So an individual that may be working, that may be earning above those SSI limits, and may be accumulating assets beyond $2,000, may be able to still qualify for Medicaid support services. So we cannot speak to 50 different states or even properties outside of the United States. So forgive me if we're doing something that's way too basic for your specific level. But if you want to talk individually about your circumstances, we'll do individual consultations or we'll answer questions as long as you'd like while we're here today. But did Becky give us an answer?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, what did she say?
Mega Millions.
Mega Millions. Elizabeth hates when I do this, Becky, but I'm doing it anyway. Okay, this is $400 million, Becky. So if you win the big prize, you're morally obligated to use Elizabeth and I as your primary advisors. You have 400 million. We make sure you're never poor, and we scrape by on 1% a year. Is that fair? I think it's a good deal. But Becky answered the question correctly, which was $2,000. Now, for anyone who's experiencing this, or for anyone who sees this in their future, it's the first catch-22 of planning for your loved one with special needs. How are they going to qualify for the quality of life you want them to have, or the maximum level of independence that they can achieve, yet they need those supports to be able to achieve them? And how can they do that and only have $2,000 of assets in their name? So in the basics, we talk about things like an ABLE account. We have a whole workshop that we can deliver on ABLE account sometime in the future. But for now, for those of us that are on the workshop, the ABLE account stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. And it's very similar for those that are familiar with college education savings plans that are called 529s. They're actually on the same Internal Revenue Code level as those savings plans. And it allows an individual with disabilities to put up to $16,000 a year into an account. And those assets do not count against their government support services. And you can accumulate up to $100,000 in that account without affecting any Social Security services as well. In most states, if an individual is able to work and earn beyond the basic SSI income limits, then they can put an additional $12,000+ into the account in any 1 year. So for those of us that have a loved one with special needs in our family, it's pretty much a universally accepted idea that, with rare exception, an ABLE account can be put to good use. So if you have questions about those, we'll answer them now or along the way. But we want you to be aware that that's the first and probably easiest thing that many families can do to prepare for that Medicaid limitation. And we want you to know that those types of accounts aren't something that you would come to our office and open, or you would go to your local bank and open. Very much like those 529 plans, you're going to do most of those things online. So in the chat, if you want to go and learn more about ABLE accounts on your own, we have a website we'll give you. It's called ablenrc.org. ablenrc.org. Probably in the chat? Of course, you're the best. Okay.
Quick question.
Yes.
Can you use SSI dollars to fund an ABLE account?
Yes, you can. As long as the SSI dollars come in, and then those SSI dollars are transferred out of the representative payee account before that account balance exceeds $2,000, you are absolutely allowed to use that money. When you learn about the ABLE account is very liberal for what it can pay for, and it can pay for things including some housing expenses, which is what SSI was designed for. So the answer to that question is yes. But what you're looking at on the screen is probably the first takeaway that we can give you that's easily accomplished. And it says review beneficiaries. All of us recognize that when we have work-related benefits, if I work for an employer and they provide group life insurance, or if I work for an employer and I have a retirement plan, each of those benefits, each of those types of accounts have what are known as named beneficiaries. And most of us know that. We're going to name an individual, whether it's a spouse or another individual or a family member, a beneficiary. What most people don't realize, however, and we've been doing employee benefits in our organization for a long time, is when you're filling out those forms, there's a little box on that application, and that box says, if you don't name a contingent beneficiary, then all of the children of your marriage become automatic contingent beneficiaries. So think for a moment about this scenario, because it happens way too often. Here's the scenario. Mom and dad never learned about that. Mom and dad never named contingent beneficiaries, or mom and dad had each other as beneficiary, but one of them passed away and it was never changed. Now, mom and dad pass away, and whether it's life insurance proceeds or whether it's retirement plan proceeds, now they're going to our loved one with special needs, which automatically brings them above the $2,000 asset level. So think about the damage that ensues. We have a loved one with special needs. They're an adult. They're either living independently, semi-independently, they're working, they're part of a day program, whatever their adult life achievements have gotten to that point. Now they lose a parent, probably their second one, and they're immediately eliminated from their Medicaid support levels. And what we teach our families is the only thing that changes that, or the only thing that fixes that, is going to be time and money. And if you're not there to control that, you can imagine the disaster that ensues. So it's one of the easiest things that you can do to change your planning. You can go to your employer or your insurance companies tomorrow and ask them for change of beneficiary forms. And what you simply do is you put the primary beneficiary exactly like you had it or you want it, but you name a contingent beneficiary that is not your dependent with special needs. We're going to talk later about a special needs trust. That would be the ideal beneficiary, and we'll get into more of that in detail. The other thing I want you to take a look at on the screen is the thing that says inheritance. Many times we have family members, we have loved ones, we have neighbors and friends who think it would be a very nice gesture to include our loved one with special needs in their estate planning. And if you think about it for a minute, the same problem ensues. If they leave directly your loved one with special needs assets over $2,000, we have that same issue. So when we're planning with families, we teach them to contact those potential people and let them know to make your special needs trust or something else the beneficiary. Before we move on, does anybody have any questions about anything so far? All good.
No, good.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. This really is so important because this, the old saying, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. This
100%.
is just amazing. So thank you. Wow.
And it's true. Ken, cliches are cliches because they have a fair amount of truth in them.
There we go.
This is one of those areas that's easily avoidable.
It really seems to be.
Okay. Step 3 is have a family meeting. Again, having a family meeting may not be something that's earth-shattering. And we also know that when we have a sibling with special needs and we're raising a sibling or a family, it's all hands on deck. Everyone's participating, everyone's doing their part. But when we're talking about what happens to that loved one after mom and dad are gone, now we're talking about different circumstances. And when we said in step 1, have a plan, we want to remind you that hoping something happens is not a plan. We want to remind you that hoping laws change is not a plan. And we also want to remind you that the intention that you want a sibling to step into that role is not a formalized plan. If we want a sibling of our special needs loved one to step into our role, we have to think of a number of things. Number 1, are they physically able to do that? Number 2, are they geographically able? Are they living in the area where you want your loved one with special needs to live? Number 3, are they psychologically or family able? Meaning, do they have their own family obligations and maybe they're not able to do that? And lastly, are they financially able? Which is where your planning comes in. We're going to talk later about a document that helps you have that meeting and make it have better successful outcomes. Step 4 is create a team. Exactly what Ken's mission is, exactly what he was talking about, being person focused. We want you to recognize that all of the people that could be in your life or in your loved one with special needs life play a role. So whether they're financial professionals like ourselves, whether they're clinicians and educators, whether they're legal professionals, etc. But what I want you to imagine for a moment is everyone being at a table who represents all of those areas, and we have one common goal, which is a plan to improve the quality of life for your loved one. Now, we know that doesn't happen automatically. We also recognize that you're the person that needs to coordinate that, but we want you to recognize that going through this planning process helps you achieve better outcomes in all of those areas. And step 5 is to get additional resource support. First, let me congratulate you for being here because you're already doing that. Just by virtue of being connected with Opeeka, we know that you're involved in that. At Special Needs Funding Coach, we want to make sure that we bring people to their correct nonprofits if it's for a specific ailment, a specific type of disability, or if it's geographically local. So we always use New Jersey as an example. The ARC of New Jersey is probably one of the better ARC of all of the states in the country, and the resources they have on their website alone are amazing. In the autism world, Elizabeth came to us from Autism New Jersey. For our money, Autism New Jersey is probably one of the best state-run nonprofits that we've ever run into. So whether you're connected to Opeeka or other local nonprofits, all the resources that you can bring to the table, and equally important, all of the people that you will meet who have had your similar challenges and who have solved those things become a very, very important resource for you. And the other one, of course, is government agencies. We talked about Medicaid. Now we're going to talk about Social Security along with Medicaid. I see Frank Messina raised his hand.
Okay, Ken, are you able to let
I don't
Frank unmute to ask? His
Yeah, I don't see a
question?
question in there. So Frank, if you can type a question. And while
Okay.
Frank's
You can
typing,
unmute yourself.
I don't
Yes,
think
I've-
so at this point.
I've gone ahead and
Okay.
allowed Frank to talk, so feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
thank
Okay.
you so much.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
All
Frank.
right. My question is this, a gentleman just said that you would, to have a trustee or someone to manage the trust after mom and dad are gone. Most likely, in my case, it's my 2 children, my son's brother and sister, but neither one of them live in the state that he is resident in. We were thinking of putting the institution or it's an ICF home as the beneficiary, not the benefit, but the trustee to manage his special needs trust. Now, I've been advised that that's not usually a good idea, but I like where he's at, and there's a good chance one of my children may move to North Carolina to be able to be, to be able to help my son if something that happens to us. What is your opinion on that, as putting it to be able to have a third party, so to speak, or a residency home that he's in to manage his special needs trust?
Okay. And your name is Dominic?
Frank.
Frank. I don't know why I came up with Dominic.
Well,
Frank.
we're Italian, that's why.
Frank, what state do you live in?
I live in North Carolina.
Okay. So each state, Frank, has different organizations or different pathways for some of those things to happen. So it is an individual situation. Everyone's situation is different. But let me address your question directly and then give you a quick overview if you're okay with that.
Sure.
The one thing that we teach our families is the person who's going to step in and be guardian doesn't have to be the trustee. So let me give you an example. If you have your son's siblings be trustee, but they don't necessarily live locally, then you may have the home or an organization from your state step in to be caretaker day-to-day guardian. But when they need something for your son, they come to the trustee to get the resources for that to happen. The reason we recommend that is we don't want a home to have complete control over the assets that you intended to be used for your special needs loved one if there's no checks and balances for that to happen. Also, I want you to be aware that there are some organizations across the country that will be professional trustees for special needs trust. Now, I'll warn you, there's not a lot of them. And I'll also tell you that they're going to want that trust to have a minimum amount of assets in it, but those organizations are also available. And lastly, each state will typically have at least one, what's known as a pooled trust. They're run typically by nonprofit organizations. And many of those nonprofit organizations, they don't necessarily have to use their trust. A pool trust is when you don't get your own, but each individual has an account. It's run by a nonprofit, so it qualifies. But there are some limitations to that we can talk about later on. But they will also be willing to manage a trust, even if it's your individual trust. So depending on where you are geographically, there are a number of different options. And certainly in your case, we'd be happy to chat and try to collaborate with you what individual resources you would use. But just remember two things for everyone that's on the workshop. One is the guardian and trustee do not have to be the same person. And typically it's a good thing if they're multiples, because this way you do have what they call trust protectors, or what we commonly known as checks and balances.
Thank you very much. That helped me out a lot.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking the question.
And Frank, when you get a chance, if you want to look through the chat, I put some information in there and some of the other participants did as well.
Thank you.
That's why Elizabeth's awesome. Okay, so we talked about Medicaid. Now, many people that don't have an adult with special needs typically think Medicaid is health insurance for those people that have no other way to get it. They're not making enough income, they don't have benefits at work, et cetera, et cetera. And in reality, that's true. But when it comes to adult services with special needs, the overwhelming majority of them are delivered through Medicaid, which means we have to position the assets for the individual with special needs in such a way that they'll always be able to qualify for those supports. And it isn't just the health insurance. It's supplies, it's equipment, it's transportation, it's job coaches, it's home health care assistance, it's custodial assistance, anything that your loved one would need to have that level of independence and quality of life. If it's coming from government support services, then the assets have to be set up appropriately, not only while you're living, but again, once you're gone. Now, before that happens, our loved ones with special needs reach the age of 18. And in every state that we know of, when you reach the age of 18, you are considered an adult in the eyes of the law. Now, there are a number of things that we're going to talk about that are planning issues for that, but the most important one is the financial assistance side. When your loved one with special needs is a minor, their qualification for Social Security would be based on your income. So most people, if they're working full-time, their loved one with special needs who's a minor doesn't qualify for Social Security. However, once your loved one turns age 18, now they are allowed to apply for Social Security. So here's our next question for the chat. Type in the answer if you know it, or if you can try to explain briefly the difference between SSDI and SSI. What's the difference between SSDI and SSI? And an acceptable answer is not D.
Okay, we have Social Security income. We have SSDI is if you worked previously.
Okay, who said that?
That one was Christine. We
Okay.
also had SSDI is for disabled people. SSI is not.
Okay, first correct answer was
Christine.
Christine. Christine, type in the, thank you first of all. And either unmute or type in the chat, scratch off Mega Millions. Which one would you prefer? And while she's deciding, what Christine said was SSDI was for those who work. And that is accurate. It's Social Security disability income. So if we are working full-time, we have a long-term disability that will qualify for Social Security disability income. The amount of financial assistance we will receive is based on our own work histories. SSI, supplemental security income, is based for those people who are not going to be able to earn enough income to qualify at some point in the future for SSDI. SSI is designed for a basic food and shelter. For example, here in New Jersey, and the amounts vary state by state, but not by very much. But here in New Jersey, the maximum amount of SSI that an individual is going to receive is around $800. Now, I don't know where in New Jersey Elizabeth or I could live and eat for $800 a month, but that's the maximum number. But we also see way too many times that individuals that have a loved one with special needs that are living with them as adults, they suddenly get a reduced amount from SSI. And the reason they get a reduced amount is because they are allowing their loved one with special needs to live in their home, and they're not charging them rent, or that individual is not paying their fair share of expenses. Social Security is going to reward you for that by reducing your benefit by up to a third. It's known as in-kind support. If Social Security is paying an individual with a disability who's an adult for their basic food and shelter, but somebody else is providing that for free, then Social Security says we don't need to pay you as much. Now, the reason we bring that to your attention is many people just accept that reduction. Many people aren't aware of it. And if you're aware of it before the age of 18, you can let Social Security know that you're charging your loved one their fair share of expenses. If your reduction has already happened, you can go back to Social Security and reapply and say, we are now charging that adult their fair share of expenses, so we'd like their SSI increased. That is legal to ask for, and Social Security sadly will never guide you in that direction.
There's a comment where one of the participants is saying that her 13-year-old daughter gets SSDI.
If that means mom or dad's disabled or
Survivor.
retired.
Okay.
So the question came across the chat that they have a disabled minor child that receives SSDI. What happens is if mom and dad are on Social Security disability and their disabled child as a result would receive more than they are able to receive it. In addition, when we have a special needs loved one where mom and dad retire and now they're on Social Security income for retirement, that also enables that individual with special needs to have an increase in income. It's called a disabled adult child. Now, two things to remember about SSI. One is you apply when you're age 18. Secondly, when your individual with special needs turns age 21, that is when they will apply for Medicaid for adult services. If that individual qualifies for SSI, they automatically qualify for Medicaid. That's why it's important to deal with it in that chronological order. Any other questions before we continue?
No, we're good.
All right, we got a good group. Okay, so the other thing we're going to start to talk about is in your planning, there are two sides to it. There is the legal side and there's the financial side. So for the next couple minutes, I want to talk to you about the legal side, but I want to do it in such a way that you, A, never forget it, and B, no one can ever confuse you about it again. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a will. Now, it's almost common understanding that most people recognize they should have a will. Typically, if you have a spouse, if you own a home, if you have a family, then you should have a will. Those that have minor children recognize that when they have a will, they're going to name guardian, God forbid mom and dad die in a common accident. But still, 60 to 70% of the population never goes around and getting one. It's something they never got to, or they don't want to have the argument of who's going to be guardian for their children because they may disagree on who that is, so they never get around to it. So first, we want to talk about what a will is. And the next thing we want to talk about is what a will does. And hopefully at the end of that conversation, everyone on the workshop will recognize that having a will is imperative. So here's your next question for the chat, or if you're taking notes, If you're taking notes, write down will and then write an equal sign. And what I want you to do in the chat is I want you to give me a one-word definition for a will. Give me a one-word definition for a will. And Elizabeth and I have a side bet on our responses.
While they're thinking about that, we do have an ongoing conversation about someone else now has a child who received SSDI before 18 parents were not retired or disabled.
That only means then that the income of the parents is not significant enough
Okay.
to not qualify.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, so will equals, I'm going to go through in order what we've got. Wishes, security,
Security.
plan, protection, plan, intent, protection,
Okay.
security, plan, safety.
And all of those are good words. If you heard Elizabeth, you heard plan a lot. You heard security, you heard wishes. And all of those are either good descriptions or things that are included in a will. The one word I want you to remember, because it's so simple, plan's a good one. Note is the word I want you to remember. N-O-T-E. A will is a note. If you were going away for the weekend, you were asking us to watch your home or watch your family, you would leave us a note with instructions, where you are, hoping we don't call. Here's where the neighbor's name is. Here's where the circuit breaker is. Here's the doctor's number, et cetera, et cetera. You would leave us a note to help us carry out what's going to happen when you're gone. Well, a will is your note and you're never coming back. So if you're going away, you're never coming back. What do you want your note to say? Well, let's talk about what a will does. First thing a will does, it says who gets your stuff, right? You want to name who gets all of the things that you own. Now, a couple things to be aware of. Number one, if you own a home with somebody else and you're considered joint owners with rights of survivorship. So if I own a house with Elizabeth and I say, I want my half of the house to go to my brother in my will, it doesn't go there because Elizabeth had joint ownership. It automatically goes to her. So we want you to recognize a will is your note for the assets that aren't jointly owned. Secondly, as we were talking about earlier, all of the employee benefits that you have, like 401ks or retirement plans, all the IRAs that you may open up, and all of the life insurance you have named beneficiaries, which means they don't even go through your will. They go directly who you say in those beneficiary forms. That's why we touched upon that earlier. So first thing a will does, your note says who gets your stuff. Second thing your will does, your note says who becomes guardian of your dependents. We recognize that when your children are minors, you are legal guardian. But when your children turn age 18, now they're independent adults in the eyes of the law. So we'll talk about guardianship a little bit later, but if your individual with special needs protection and care and needs someone to handle their affairs, then guardianship at the very least must be considered.
We have a question, if you just want to clarify. So all those assets that you're mentioning that would be in a will, do those count as income when you have SSI? I think it's just if they're in the individual's name, right? Not
Yes,
their
if they're in the
parents'
individual's name, so they don't count as income. But if you are leaving assets through the will, that's where it's very important to understand who we're leaving them to. Are we leaving them to an individual? We don't want to leave them to an individual with special needs. We want that to be a trust or another individual or another entity. So first thing my note does, who gets my stuff? Second thing my note does, who becomes guardian of my dependent? Third thing my note does is, who am I asking to accomplish this? It's called an executor and executrix. Who's the person that I'm going to name to do that? So first thing I want you to remember, so if you ever talk to an attorney or if you ever go to a workshop and they start to talk about estate planning and your eyes glaze over, a will is simply a note and you're never coming back.
Quick question.
Please.
We have someone who has legal custody of 3 children with special needs. If she passes away, can she name someone other than their biological father as guardian?
That's an individual situation. It depends on what the circumstances were for her being named custodian. If she's been named full guardian, which means that father either had to have legally signed away or had those rights taken away, then yes, she can name successor guardian. But that's an individual situation, and circumstances are a little bit different. So we can talk about that individually on an individual consultation if you'd like. So next thing we're going to talk about is a trust. And we know from all of our workshop participants' feedback, as soon as most people see a trust, they think that's not them. They think, oh, that's for like rich families, or that's for trust fund babies. When in the real world, families that have assets and property could always benefit from using a trust. When we have a special needs dependent, a trust, particularly a special needs trust, was what we're going to talk about, it's almost imperative if you want to do any successful asset and multi-generational planning, particularly for your loved one with special needs. So just like we talked about a will being a note, now I want you to give me a one-word definition for a trust. Type in the chat your one-word definition for a trust. If a will is a note, a trust equals.
This is an incredible group. Very cool.
I think a long
Oh,
answer.
you take your
Something
time,
else.
Elizabeth.
Hold on, make sure it goes
Elizabeth's
together.
multitasking for us, so.
Okay, there you go. So back up, let's see what I missed. Okay. We do have a couple of questions, and okay, so trust equals safe, protection, support, security, separate entity, money, safety, funds, responsibility.
You guys are awesome. All of those things that Elizabeth was mentioning, safety, security, things like that, they're excellent definitions and excellent descriptions. The one I just want to use to make it real simple, no matter what type of trust you talk about, and then we're going to get into special needs trust, is a trust is a bucket. If a will is a note, a trust is a bucket. So let's talk about what a bucket does. A bucket, first thing it does is it holds the stuff that you put in it, right? So if we're going to have a trust, particularly a special needs trust, what are we putting in it that we specifically want used for our loved one with special needs? So we want to talk about what assets would we be putting in a trust. So first thing that bucket does is it holds whatever assets you want used for your loved one with special needs. Second thing, think about what a bucket does. A bucket protects things that are in it from outside sources, right? So when we're talking about assets that we want used for your loved one with special needs, what outside sources are we talking about? Well, number one, the government. Assets that are in a properly drafted special needs trust, the government never gets their hands on. Secondly, is unscrupulous people. People that may otherwise not use those funds for what we wanted them intended for, or who may take advantage of our loved one with special needs. So this is where in our planning, we meet families that say, well, Elizabeth, Don, we really don't have millions of dollars. It's only going to be our house or our insurances or our retirements. So what we're going to do is our loved one with special needs is Johnny. And Johnny has a sister, Patty. So we're just going to leave the assets to Patty, and Patty will use them for John. There are two problems with that situation. They are known as gifts of moral obligation. So here's the two problems. Number one, there's no way of legally determining and making sure that those assets are spent the way you want them spent. And as we know, most families would say to us, absolutely not. We know Patty would always do the right thing. We're 110% sure of that. But the second thing is what's called civil litigation. If those assets are in Patty's name and Patty is subject to civil litigation, now those assets become part of that litigation. And the most common civil litigation we want to bring to your attention is divorce. What happens if you leave the assets for Johnny to Sister Patty, but after that, Sister Patty's husband decides that's the year they want a divorce? Suddenly the assets that you intended for your special needs loved one become part of civil litigation. That is why a trust is so important and is so imperative when it comes to a special needs individual. Remember, those assets need to be not in their name, but we want them spent on our loved one. So, number one, trust. Trust is a bucket. Number two, we need to do a special needs trust. Why? Because a special needs trust is different than any other trust, which means we need to use a qualified special needs attorney, which we'll talk about in a minute. So if anyone is on the workshop and you either have been involved in a family trust or you've been a beneficiary of a trust, most trusts have common language. The common language says the trust can help pay for the health, education, maintenance, and support of that trust beneficiary. A special needs trust cannot have that language in it because a special needs trust cannot pay for basic food and shelter. Why? That's what SSI was designed for. A special needs trust cannot pay for services that are otherwise provided through organizations like Medicaid. So having a properly drafted special needs trust is imperative. Now, why do we bring that up? Because it's so common that mistakes are made and the trust doesn't qualify. What do I mean by a trust not qualifying? What generally happens that most of our families don't realize is if mom and dad draw up a special needs trust, typically that trust is going to be predominantly funded when the second of mom and dad pass away. And it's then going to be read by someone at Social Security. And unfortunately, it's not an attorney, it's going to be a layperson. And that layperson is trained to look for certain words or triggers that disqualify the trust. So remember when we were talking earlier about when things like this ensue, the only thing that solves it is time and money? Same thing with a disqualified special needs trust. You spent the time to draw up a trust, but you didn't do it with a qualified special needs attorney. Now all the assets that are going to go in that trust are now going to be subject to exposure, which causes a whole lot of problems and not what you intended. At Special Needs Funding Coach, we don't do the legal documents. We're not attorneys, but we emphasize this point so much because all too often we see mistakes made.
You got questions?
Questions?
Yeah, hold on.
And while Elizabeth is typing, we have had a really interactive session. So if it's okay to go a little over the time, if you're available, that would be an amazing thing. And we just let people know that there's still more information, but this has been a very interactive group. So
I'll post the survey link in just a moment for those that need to get off promptly at 2, so they can provide their information if they want a resource kit and a consultation. I don't have your mailing address or anything else otherwise, so you need to kind of provide that.
So,
but we can keep going on beyond.
yeah, we will be happy to stay as long as people have questions. I promise you I'll speed it up. But to Elizabeth's point, please, if you're not able to stay any longer, we're asking you to complete our survey. Number one, it shows all of the resources and companies that we're working with, that we're speaking to live people. More importantly to us, it allows us to provide you specific information that you request. And if you give us your mailing address, we will send you a complete kit. I feel like the QVC guy now. But the complete kit has all resources in there, a special needs planning quiz, most common mistakes families make, an overview of special needs planning. So we need your physical mailing address to be able to send that if you would like it. And lastly, anyone who attends our workshop, we will give you a free initial consultation to ask any of your personal questions. We can do it by phone, we can do it by Zoom, we can do it in person if it's local, whatever your preferences are. So please, please, please fill out the survey for us. So,
Okay.
questions?
Yes, there's a bunch. First one, are there checks and balances in the special needs trust setup to avoid mishandling?
Great question. The answer is absolutely yes. There are a number of them. Number one, the trust itself. The great thing about a trust is many people think the trust is the end all, meaning, okay, we did the trust, our special needs planning's done. When in reality, the trust should be the individualized document that does what you want it to do. What do I mean by that? We talked about what a special needs trust can pay for. Special needs trust can pay for basic food and shelter, can pay for programs that are otherwise provided by government supports. But a special needs trust can pay for anything else that's legal. So a special needs trust can pay for accounting fees, legal fees, investment management fees. A special needs trust can pay for a family member to fly across the country and take our loved one with special needs on vacation. A special needs trust can provide the resources where a loved one can add on to their house, put an addition on, alter their home, all with the idea of making it conducive for living for your special needs loved one. So your special needs trust should be as individualized as you want it to be to make sure that that happens. I answer the question. Okay.
So another one is we have a couple similar comments
Okay.
from savings to be doing right now.
Right.
So what if you have a large insurance policy but no will?
Okay.
When you set up a trust to receive that.
That's a great question. So the question revolves around if we have limited assets and the only thing that we're using in our planning is an existing life insurance policy, how do we do that if we're not going to go establish an individual trust? Remember, we can't make our loved one with special needs a direct beneficiary. So typically what we guide families to do is to seek out in the state that they're living the pooled trust. It's called a pooled trust, P-O-O-L-E-D, pooled trust. Pooled trusts are typically run by qualified attorneys and nonprofit organizations. And what they allow families to do is not have to establish their own trust, still have a trust that qualifies as a special needs trust, but each individual that has a piece of that trust has their own account. So if you were leaving, let's say, $100,000 life insurance policy, it's for your loved one with special needs, and you put it into the pooled trust. Now their value is $100,000 in that pooled trust, which is absolutely fine. But there are two things that I want you to be aware of when you're dealing with a pooled trust. Number one, if your loved one with special needs passes away and there are assets left in their account, typically the trust gets a piece of those assets. And number two, pooled trusts typically have annual fees and some of them aren't cheap. And they take them out of the assets that you leave in the account.
There's a couple related questions about trusts. I'm going to throw them to you at once. I think you can
Thank you.
collaborate them.
Sure.
Or that's not the right word, but okay. So for the trust,
Connect them.
there you go. Firstly, do you have to have money in it when you open one? 2, is there a fee to maintain it? And 3, I just lost 3. How do you physically put money into the trust? Do you make a deposit at the bank, or how does that happen?
It's an excellent question. Okay. Number one, let's go back to our analogy. Trust is a bucket. So that bucket, you do not have to fill it when you establish the trust. Typically and ideally, a trust is going to be funded when mom and dad pass away. Because if you think about it logically, that's when you're going to ask someone else to step in your role. even in most cases, if mom and dad are divorced, we're still on the same page when it comes to our loved one with special needs. As long as one of us are here, we're going to be looking out for them. It's after the second of mom and dad passes away, we're asking someone to step in that role, and we want to be able to provide the resources to do it. So ideally, the trust can be funded. Let's say you establish a trust and grandma and grandpa want to leave your loved one with special needs in their estate, then they can fund the trust and it doesn't have to go directly to you, aunts and uncles, siblings, etc. So it can be funded before you pass away, but it does not have to be. But when you establish that trust, a trust, just like a human being, has to have a tax ID number. So the answer to your question is, how do we fund the trust? Anything that you want to put into a trust, anything you want the trust to own, if it's a bank account, if it's an investment policy, if it's an insurance policy, then that's going to have the name of the trust and the tax ID number on it. And then the last question is there a fee to maintain a trust? The fee only comes in to maintain a trust once it's funded. So if a trust is funded and now we have assets in the trust, then every year that trust has to file a tax return. So somebody's going to have to do that, either the trustee or the trustee is going to have to pay a qualified accountant to do something like that. And we also want to be very careful about the assets we put in a trust, because unlike you and I, when we're working, we have a tax bracket that's based on our income. A trust has a very low threshold. That means that it's automatically in the highest tax bracket once you have growth that's over $1,500 a year. So the assets you put in the trust should also be chosen carefully and managed properly.
Another one, if you just want to clarify, I kind of answered this in the chat, but just to hear it from you, because you're the financial person. The special needs trust can only be for individuals with special needs. You can't have one for all of your children if some of those children are.
That is correct.
Correct?
That is correct.
So they could divide, they could say 50% of my stuff goes to the trust for the child with special needs, 50% goes to the neurotypical child, just in their own name.
You are absolutely correct. So what Elizabeth was explaining is, when a family says, do I need a separate trust for my loved one with special needs? The answer is absolutely yes. Now, depending on how your estate's set up and how sophisticated and complicated you can be, there may be several trusts. There may be a family trust, which is for all of your other relatives or whoever else you want to be a beneficiary of your estate, and a special needs trust. All of your assets could go into the family trust. The family trust could fund the special needs trust. There's all different ways to do it. But the answer to your question is very simple. Yes, you can leave a piece of your estate or a piece of your insurance policy to the trust, and the rest of the assets to your other people directly. You are allowed to do that.
And follow-up, we have families that have multiple children with special needs. Can they do one special needs trust for multiple siblings with special needs, or separate ones?
Okay, it's an excellent question. We run into that a lot. The legal answer is yes. You can have one special needs trust that's taking care of multiple siblings. However, I would caution you, I don't want to spend your money, but I would tell you to make sure you have a very good special needs attorney so that trust is accomplishing what you want it to accomplish. One thing about special needs trust also is, unlike an ABLE account, if you open up an ABLE account for your loved one with special needs, they can only have one. For special needs trust, your beneficiary, your loved one with special needs, can be the beneficiary of multiple special needs trusts, which happens more often than you might think. Grandma and grandpa may want to have their own. Mom and dad, if they're divorced, may want to have their own. So just so you're aware, it does not have to be only one. For ABLE accounts, only one. For special needs trust, the beneficiary can have multiple.
Okay, I don't think on this session we talked about the limits to an ABLE account, so I put in there
Thank you.
16,000 per year, 100,000
Yes.
total. The question is, can a family member leave an inheritance to an ABLE account directly and it not affect SSI eligibility?
Okay, the answer is yes, but you got to remember the limitations. The limitations annually are 16,000. So if a family member wants to leave money to the ABLE account, then it has to be less than 16,000, otherwise it won't qualify.
Okay, and given the current political situation, what if the SSI program fails at some point after your death? And your loved one with special needs needs money for living expenses?
There you go. And somebody, whoever brought that up, we discussed that a lot with our families when we're talking about what am I going to fund my trust with? Now, it's very important to remember a couple of things about government services. When we talk about ABLE accounts, for example, you can have as much as $100,000 in that account. However, if your loved one with special needs passes away and there are assets left in that ABLE account, Medicaid gets reimbursed for every dollar of services that they provided. So what we teach our families is to use the ABLE account as a tool, but not as a major accumulator of assets. That's first. Secondly, when you're funding a special needs trust, if it's a properly crafted special needs trust, then if your loved one passes away and there's assets left in it, you determine where they go. They can go to other family members, they can go to caretakers, they can go to the dozens and dozens of worthy charities that you decide, but they never go to the government. So we talk to families about, you have a choice. You can minimum fund your special needs trust with the thought of, well, our loved one is already in a group home and they're already on Medicaid and all their needs are taken care of. Well, if you want any level of care that's above welfare level, then the special needs trust should exist. But secondly, to your point, if the bottom drops out of government services, Medicaid doesn't provide services anymore, SSI reduces financial income support, then there does have to be an alternative, and that's where your special needs trust planning should come in. It's a great question. Thank you for bringing it up.
Okay. And this one has come up twice. I did put the three organizations in the chat, but if you want to say anything else, people are asking where they can find a special needs attorney.
Okay, yes. Elizabeth put in the chat, there are a number of different organizations you can use. First one is called the National Association of Elder Law Attorneys. Elder law and special needs law, eerily similar in Medicaid, social supports, etc. The second one is there's an organization called the Special Needs Alliance. It's organizations of special needs attorneys. You have to be invited by a special needs attorney to join that organization. And the last one is called the Academy of Special Needs Planners. You either have to be a special needs attorney or you need to be a qualified financial person like myself that has a chartered special needs consultant designation. And certainly through referrals from us. We typically work with families, and if they don't have an attorney yet, by the time they get to the end of our process, which kind of leads me to our next two steps, they're ready to go see the attorney. They know what their trust is going to be funded with. They know who their trustees and successor trustees are going to be. And it oftentimes makes that process easier. And if the attorney's charging by the hour, it could save money. But we will happily refer you to an attorney. If you just want to go to any of those organizations and look for a contact, you may do that as well. But we do want to emphasize, please work with a qualified special needs attorney. Okay. We talked about guardianship a little bit. We won't harp on that. Everyone's situation is different. We just want you to let you know it's not an all or nothing thing. But certainly you need to understand the implications of guardianship or non-guardianship or know some of the alternatives. The easy example, you have a loved one with special needs, they're an adult. They're either away at school, they're living independently, they're at a day program. Something happens to them where they get sick or hurt. They're taken to the hospital. You as the parent rush there to oversee like you always do. But now because of HIPAA laws, the government says they're not supposed to be telling you or allowing you to make those decisions because you're not guardian. So at the very least, even if you have neurotypical children that are going to college, we suggest you at the very least have a medical power of attorney. So you've sat through this workshop, you've come to the realization that, yep, we want to do this, or you've already started this, and you know who you're going to ask to step into that role. So the question now becomes, how do I make sure that they're going to provide the kind of care that I give? How are you going to have somebody do the things that on a day-to-day basis you do unconsciously competent? because you know that. Well, we have something that we use, it's called a letter of intent. Now, a letter of intent is not a legal document, but if a will's a note and a trust is a bucket, from our special needs funding coach perspective, the letter of intent is the playbook that's going to connect the two and make all of that work successful. So what is a letter of intent? Letter of intent could be a handwritten note. For families that have somebody who's medically involved, the letter of intent could be a video to show people how to care for your loved one. In our organization, because of our connection to the MetLife Center for Special Needs Planning for many years, our letter of intent is a 38-page document. Now, we don't tell you that to overwhelm you or to frighten you. It's to make sure you don't miss anything. What we teach our families is a letter of intent is probably everything that's already in your head. Which doctors do you go to? Which places would you never go back to again? What is your special needs loved one love to do? What do they hate to do? What are your thoughts on housing? What are your thoughts on religion? What are your thoughts on dating? All of those things that you would want somebody that you're asking to step in your role to know. Plus, when we talked earlier about that family conversation, going through the letter of intent helps you have that conversation with those people that you're going to ask to step into that role. And knowing that you've gone through the process of planning, you've gone through the process of legally planning, you've gone through the process of planning financially, and you're now providing them a written playbook, then it's going to make it easier for them to step into that role. And the end of the day, what do we want? We want better outcomes for your individual and loved one with special needs. So to wrap things up, you can see there's both the legal side and the financial side. How do we help? We introduce you to nonprofit partnerships. Thankfully, you know Opeeka, you're already connected. We will introduce you to special needs attorneys, and equally important to us, we will teach you how to plan financially and maximize your resources so you're putting the things that you know you want to happen in place. Many times when we speak across the country or we go to conferences or conventions, families will come up to us and say, we've got our special needs planning done, we've done a special needs trust. And then the most common question we'll then ask is, okay, what are you going to put in it? And if somebody hasn't done planning, they typically start thinking. And if you've not done any particular planning for that trust, and you live to your life expectancy, the two biggest assets that are going to be left in your life are going to be your home and whatever's left in your retirement accounts. And while those two assets could go in a special needs trust, they are probably the least efficient, both cost and tax-wise assets to fund the trust with. And then lastly, just as a bonus, we want to talk to you about something that's available now that most people aren't aware of. And for our special needs families, we want to make sure you know about it. It's called life insurance with living benefits. If you have life insurance today, whether it's at work or whether it's individual, I want you to think about a scenario. You have a critical illness, heart attack, cancer, stroke, etc. But that critical illness does not kill you, or you need long-term care. Now, if you go back to your current life insurance company and say, I'm not dead yet, but I'd like to use some of the life insurance money before I die, you already know the answer. The answer is no. Well, in today's world, the answer is yes. There are companies today that issue life insurance policies which are known as living benefits. So if you have that critical illness, heart attack, cancer, stroke, etc., if you need long-term care, you are allowed to use a portion of your death benefit tax-free before you die. For our special needs families, it's key to understand that because it's a very valuable asset. If you don't know about it, learn about it. We'll be happy to teach you. 20 years from now, hopefully every company will do it. Today, there are only a handful, and there are very few that do it very well. So in summary, think about finding those quality professionals, both financially and legally, that can help you successfully plan. Don't think you have to know everything. You just have to know where to get those resources. We also thank you for sharing the time with us because we recognize you are the expert and you are the best advocate when it comes to your loved one with special needs. And when we're talking about answering that question, what happens when I'm gone, we always want you to remember two things: a quality of life and a lifetime of care for your loved one with special needs.
Wow.
There's all our contact information. Please take the survey. Ken, I'm going to throw it back to you, and we will stay as long as people have questions.
Well, I got to say, this was really incredible. I thought I learned, but you took such a deeper dive. You broke it out into 3 different areas: medical treatments, education, housing. When we think about care planning, that's often left out for those individuals who do have special needs. You've put it together so that when you look at your care circle and you want to collaborate towards care planning throughout a lifetime, you've done so where you're meeting continuous needs around medical treatment, education, and housing, which is lifelong. And I know I can't thank you enough. Everyone at Opeeka, I feel that they convey a wonderful thank you to both of you, as well as the attendees, because we saw a lot of people who were on the call who were family members. And the part of the process is information, knowledge is power. And the more they know, the more they're able to really live their lives without the worry. There's always worry, being a parent myself, and but also remembering my brother-in-law, who's now turning 40, how quickly time passes, and knowing that he can never live independently, but living independent as much as he can with a family that loves him very much. So thank you to you, Don, to you, Elizabeth, and everyone on this session, especially taking a little extra time. Thank you. That means the world, and especially the world we live in. I know our financial things are up and down, but I know the kindness and collaboration that you all offer is a constant, and want to thank you very much. So if people want to just have a couple more opportunities to ask any questions, otherwise they have the contact information. You'll get back, and I can't thank you enough for all that you do. It really does make a difference.
It's great to collaborate with you, Ken. We love the spirit. Thank you for everyone that's taken the time. Please give us the courtesy of filling out the survey, and certainly if you want either a consultation or one of those folders, just provide us that information and we will happily get it out to you.
Thank you. And that's a really great offer to provide such resources. And I don't know if anyone else has added any more questions. And
No, I think we're all good.
again, thank you so much. And Elizabeth, great seeing you. And
You
Don,
too.
again, great. I hope to have many more opportunities. You mentioned 2 great organizations, not just in New Jersey, but specifically New Jersey, Autism New Jersey, and the ARC of New Jersey and throughout the country. So thank you both, and I look forward to collaborating more.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you again.
Take care.